This program is a part of the Full Press Radio Network. Find this and all of Full Press Coverage's shows on fullpressradio.com or free on the Full Press Coverage app, available now on the Apple and Google Play stores.
This is Ernie Accorsi. You're listening to the Eye Test for Truth.
Welcome back to part 2 of our countdown to the draft on the Eye Test for Two podcast. I'm Clark Judge.
I'm Ira Kaufman.
And as you should know by now, we're both Hall of Fame voters, joined today, as we always are, by our Hall of Fame producer, Ian Glendon. And soon, very soon, by Hall of Fame voter Bob Glauber of Newsday, who will give us insight on Thursday's draft in Cleveland and where the Jets and Giants are going next. And hopefully that is up. But first, guys, you're both in the Tampa area. Ira, you're in Tampa, Ian, and you're in St. Petersburg. And you both were on the Bucs bandwagon last year. I know Ira was driving it. Ian, you got on there as a Tom Brady fan. So I'm sure you saw what Rob Gronkowski did last week. Did you guys?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Well, for those who didn't, goes back to the University of Arizona, where he graduated from. At least I hope he graduated. Put on his football gear with number 48, and in front of this year's team at a practice, after a practice, caught a football drop from a helicopter 600 feet in the air, setting a Guinness Book of World Records. Caught it on the third try, mobbed by the team afterwards. And there are two things that strike me here, guys. One, that's the length of 2 football fields, so I can't imagine the speed with which that ball was coming. And secondly, who had the previous record, and why in the world is there such a thing? Ira?
I believe it was Jameis Winston against the Saints in a December game. That was 456 feet high, and O.J. Howard dropped it.
Oh, I was going to say a Saint caught it. Someone from the other team caught it. Ian, you got any answers to that?
I was going to say, if no one wants to fact check me on this, it was me who had the previous record. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, maybe we can ask Bob Glauber when he comes in, because Ira, he's got his own Wikipedia page too, I guess.
Yes, he does. You know, Bob is a longtime newspaper guy, and you know what, Clark? In the way the business is right now, that's a hell of a compliment.
That's a hell of an accomplishment, and it's such a great accomplishment that we're going to keep him waiting a couple more minutes here while I ask you a few more questions. So here's a quick one for you. Ira, you're the sage of Tampa. You know everything. One NFL owner on Tuesday said, quote, "We're looking at hope, optimism. This is a great to be alive moment, frankly," unquote. Who was it?
That's got to be Jimmy Irsay strumming a Stratocaster.
That's a good guess. But it's a wrong guess. Do you know who it was? Ian, do you have an idea?
Was it Robert Kraft talking about the future? No, Robert Kraft.
Our Patriots honk coming out again in Ian Glendon. No, it was neither of those guys. It was Shad Khan of the Jacksonville Jaguars. A great to be alive moment? Maybe because they have 4 picks in the top 65. But how are they going to use those? Ira, I mean, I remember the Raiders saying great to be alive moment when they took Jamarcus Russell in 2007.
I don't think Shad Khan's going to be saying that with Urban Meyer sitting in his lap fight in November.
Yeah, we already had Sam Kavaras weigh in on that, another Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. Okay, lastly, let's go to the draft here. And what I did earlier this week was look back 5 years at the 2016 draft just to see how these things work out. And I checked the first round. And interestingly enough, of the 31 players taken, and New England didn't have a pick. They forfeited that pick, as Ian Glendon knows. Only 6 of those first rounders are with the teams that chose them, including 3 in the top 10. That would be Joey Bosa, Zeke Elliott, and Ronnie Stanley. So, Ira, what does that tell you about the draft other than Jerry Glanville was right when he said the NFL stands for not for long?
Clark, it reinforces the policy of hoarding draft picks because you're going to miss at least 50% of the time. And if you got 12 picks instead of 6, you got a better chance. That's the way it is, Clark. Those guys didn't get second contracts. No second contracts, basically.
And remember what Ernie Accorsi told us last week on this broadcast. If you miss in the top 10 or the top 5, you can set your franchise back, especially if it's quarterback. You could set your franchise back 3 to 5 years, and we've seen that happen. Okay, let's bring in Hall of Fame voter and author Bob Glauber of Newsday. Bob just stepped down as president of the Pro Football Writers Association after an extended tenure, and he is here to give us the lowdown on what to expect tomorrow in Cleveland, other than, I think, possible rain. Anyway, Bob, always good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here with 2 fellow Hall of Fame voters. It feels like we're back in the room listening to Ira go, quote, quote, John Lynch, quote.
Yeah, but it worked.
Ira, and then Clark saying, does he pass the eye test, the appropriately named the eye test?
But that worked this year, Bob. He got Lynch in.
You know what the best thing about Lynch getting in is?
No.
You don't have to hear me.
You don't have to hear Ira every friggin' year. Quote.
I'm coming back with Rondé Barber, Bobby. Bob, thanks so much for doing this. And congratulations, Bob, on that book. It was a hell of a read.
Yeah, and Ira, I want to ask him a quick question. That's Guts and Genius you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I thought that book was about you and me. But we couldn't figure out who was Guts and who was Genius.
You know what? It's fine. You can have it. It fits. It fits a lot of things, and you guys have Guts and Genius.
And Bob, mention the 3 coaches you profiled in that book.
Yeah, I did. It was a look at the 80s and early 90s with Bill Walsh, Bill Parcells, and Joe Gibbs. And, looking back, they just had these fascinating duels with each other, and they took turns winning Super Bowls. I found the era interesting and fun, and I covered a lot of those games. You guys covered a lot of those games. We talk about the old days, and you don't want to, seem like, it's like, just another old guy talking about how good it was. But, I mean, this was legit great rivalry football, and they changed the sport. And in a lot of ways, the sport reflects what those guys did, especially Walsh with the West Coast offense, still the predominant offense in football. They just, they did it 3 different ways, and it was all great. And it was really fun researching that and interviewing a lot of people. And, Walsh obviously could not be interviewed, but it was fascinating to write about someone who is gone. And, the people who knew him best talk about him. There's a lot of stuff there.
Hey, Bob, I'm going to give you the tale of the tape, Bob. It's not a happy tale, but Bob, Jets one winning season since 2010. Bob, Giants one winning season since 2012. So, Bob, my question, the Knicks have been terrible until this year. They were terrible for an extended stretch, and a lot of people think that hurt the NBA. Bob, the NFL is such a behemoth, but not having the New York teams relevant, Bob, has that had an adverse effect in any way on the league, do you think?
Yeah, I think it has. I think whenever you have the biggest market teams succeed, it creates more interest. It certainly drives television ratings. And that's why, if you notice, Giants and Jets national games are usually moved to the beginning of the season, before they just completely fall out of the race. The Giants were competitive in a terrible division last year, so they stayed relevant late. But yeah, I think the league is better when those teams are better. But I agree with you, Ira. I mean, this league is bulletproof as far as, they don't need that super team. The NBA is a little bit more dependent on great teams and great players than the NFL. They just managed to create interest and keep interest for a sustained period of time.
Bob, some general thoughts on Thursday's first round of the draft as it pertains to the 2 New York teams?
Well, I think the Jets, it seems to be a no-brainer right now that they're going to go with Zach Wilson of BYU. I think they're focused in on him, and They like his talent. They like his arm talent. They like his football IQ. There's talk of him being another Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers type guy, the way he can make plays athletically. I think it's a little premature to say that. Let's let the guy play at least a game before we talk in those terms. But, that's what we do around the draft. Yeah, this is a cycle that Jets fans are familiar with, lather, rinse, repeat, right? Get a quarterback, feel good about it, watch him play, be disappointed, move on to the next one, right? And, Sam Darnold, it happened quick. He was not happy about being let go after 3 years, but that's the way it goes. And it's a league of, Jerry Glanville was right. It's not for long. So they hope Zach Wilson can be the answer. They think he can be. And obviously it'll be interesting to watch it. I do like, though, that they wiped the slate clean. Robert Saleh, I think, is a good young coach. He's done everything he had to get to this spot. And when you have a coach and a quarterback that can kind of grow up together, I think that's a better situation.
And the Giants, Bob?
Yeah, well, the Giants, I think they found their coach. I think Joe Judge is really good, and I think they're building a good roster. Joe Judge makes Dave Gettleman look a lot better because Gettleman really scuffled his first couple of years in a lot of ways, and I think Judge is the right coach. The big question and the overriding question, the one we will never get away from until it's answered, is Daniel Jones. Can he be the guy? And if he can be the guy, then this team has a lot to look forward to. If not, you talk about being set back 3 to 5 years. That's what they're looking at. So make or break year for Daniel Jones, no question.
And what are they looking for Thursday? What are the Giants looking for?
At 11, Ira, I think their options are going to be limited. I don't know that any of the big-time receivers will be there. Maybe Jalen Waddle will be there. They may go there. I got him right now taking Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher from Miami. They can go offensive tackle. If Penei Sewell is there, maybe they go there. They did draft a tackle last year in the first round. So I think they can also go corner. So I think there are those 4 options that they have based on the board at 11. I don't think they go up. There's talk about them maybe moving up or even moving back. I think they end up staying at 11 and then go one of those 4 positions.
We're with Hall of Fame voter Bob Glauber on the eye test for 2. And Bob, since you mentioned the Giants, let me ask you a question about where they're sitting right now is at the 11th spot. Let's just say one of those 2 Alabama receivers is there. You mentioned Waddle, possibly Devontae Smith. Let's just say one of those 2 offensive tackles, Sewell or Slater, is there. Where would they go first? Would they try to get Daniel Jones another weapon, or would they try to get Daniel Jones protection?
Great question. And listen, I don't know what they're keeping it close to the vest, but I think they go either way on that one. But I think when you look at Dave Gettleman, you look at his philosophy, what does he talk about all the time? Hog mollies. Got to get the hog mollies.
Right.
And I think gun to his head, not a real gun, but, but push comes to shove, I would think he'd go hog molly in that situation.
Okay. And then secondly, since you mentioned Daniel Jones, this really, to me, is going to be the year you find out about him because they have surrounded him with some talent. And let's just say, for argument's sake, they take one of those 2 receivers. He's got talent around him, provided, of course, that Saquon Barkley spends more than a couple games in the lineup. But he now has some weapons at his disposal. Do you think this is the year you and everyone else in the New York metropolitan area finds out about Daniel Jones?
I don't think there's any question, Clark, that all things being equal, if he has a full complement of players around him, that includes Barkley, that includes an improved offensive line, and that includes a good receiving core, I think we're going to find out. And I think they have to. There was some talk about, well, maybe they go quarterback this year. Mm-hmm. But it's just, I think they just felt like there was improvement toward the second half of last year in terms of protecting the football better. And they want to give him that shot. This is a very patient organization, right, typically. And I think they're giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I think they have made it so that there are really no excuses left for Daniel Jones. This is it. Now, he had, when he was at Duke, he was under siege a lot. And I believe that no players on his team were on his offense were drafted, like none. So it's kind of not a fair fight, but they liked it about him. He was very tough and he was resilient and he kept fighting and he did well under pressure. So, they took him and they want a guy with thick skin to play in New York. So he's got the thick skin. He's a great teammate. He's got that Eli Manning, never throw a player under the bus kind of mentality. And he tries hard. He works hard. He's got all the intangibles that you want. Now it's just, does he have the talent? And
are you sold? Are you sold on him? I mean, do you think 5 years from now we're going to be talking about Daniel Jones as the quarterback of the New York Giants?
I think there's a good chance we will be talking about him as the quarterback of the New York Giants, but I think he will be more of a pedestrian quarterback than say an Eli Manning. And Eli, had his detractors about, well, is he elite? Is he Hall of Fame? But the guy won 2 Super Bowls. I don't see Daniel Jones making the throw to David Tyree or the throw to Mario Manningham in a big situation. I think he's going to have things good around him. Not a Trent Dilfer in kind of thing, but he's got to have things go better around him. I don't think he can manufacture wins like the great quarterbacks, but I think he'll be just good enough.
Bob, this is Hall of Fame centric. We've got 3 writers here, and Bob, you just mentioned Eli Manning. It's going to be one heck of a debate when he comes up. Tom Coughlin. Let me say this about Coughlin, Bob. Obviously, he's got the 2 Super Bowl wins. He made the playoffs 10 times, Bob, in 20 years. Pretty good.
Yep.
But only 20 games over 500, Bob, and that, when you compare him to the Mike Tomlins of the world that are coming up, or maybe even Harbaugh. Give me a couple of sentences on each guy. And do you think Eli's a no-brainer, Bob, or people will look at the career record and hesitate?
Well, he's a 500 quarterback career record, but as we've seen with quarterbacks, they're a victim of circumstance a lot of times. He did not have good teams around him from 2013 on. And I do personally think Eli Manning is a Hall of Fame quarterback, but I understand the debate that others will have reservations. He didn't have that. He doesn't have those transcendent. His numbers are good. Like, his numbers are really good. He's top 10 in just about everything. He's going to be passed because it's a passing league. But I think that, 2 championships, playing big in those 2 championship games, beating the team of the ages both times, should do it for him. Coughlin, I actually feel better about Coughlin overall as a more well-rounded Hall of Fame candidate than Eli. In terms of the argument, well, look what he did in Jacksonville. Expansion team gets him to the AFC Championship game, kind of a perennial playoff team with them in their earlier days. And then he goes to the Giants, who were a mess at that time in 2004, and he builds up a quarterback, and he wins 2 championships against the team of the ages and the coach of the ages. So I think the argument for Coughlin is easier than it is for Eli Manning.
What went wrong for Coughlin, Bob, those last 3 years in New York?
Well, a lot of personnel problems. He did not have defense the year he left. The Giants spent $200 million in free agency on defense, and he said something like, "Hey, I could have used that, Not long after that. Now they do it. And that's what happened. I think it got a little stale too. Eli just, he plateaued and he never really ascended after that. So it was a combination of, they felt it was time to make a change. And, it's not atypical. Tom Landry, toward the end of his run in Dallas, just kept, it was good, but not great. Coughlin he just never kind of caught that magic in the last few years of that run in New York.
What's your gut feeling, Bob, about Sam Darnold going forward? Did he get a fair shot in New York?
He didn't get a fair shot in New York, and it was not his fault. There were a lot of turnovers, and that's a problem. And I think that's what he's got to overcome moving forward. I think it's good that he gets another shot with a much more stable situation. Sam Darnold was caught in between 2 regimes 2 general managers, and 2 coaches. Impossible situation in 3 years. Impossible. So he didn't have the players around him. He did not have a good offensive line last year, and he had a coaching change after year 1. And he had a coach who it was a mess for the last 2 years with Adam Gase. So not a fair fight. Good for Sam Darnold. He goes to Matt Rule, where he's going to be there for a while, and he will get good coaching, and he will have stability on the roster, which is probably even more important.
With Hall of Fame voter Bob Glauber on the eye test for 2. And Bob, let's switch teams to the New York Jets for a moment. I'll be honest with you. I like what GM Joe Douglas is doing. I think he knows what he's doing. I thought his draft last year was pretty good. Some of his roster moves make sense to me. But now he's going to make what should be his signature move, which is a quarterback at the 2nd spot. And as you mentioned, everyone expects it to be Zach Wilson. My question to you is that about the failures of everyone who's followed Joe Namath. You know about the succession of quarterbacks, what they're up against, and what they've produced or haven't produced. What is Zach Wilson in for in terms of pressure as the quarterback of the New York Jets and the 2nd pick of the overall draft?
Well, there's pressure everywhere, but I think the pressure is bigger in New York because it's bigger in New York, and there's much more scrutiny. There's more attention. But I don't think it's the pressure that's going to make or break Zach Wilson. I think he's wired okay. I think they do a good job. Clark and Ira, you know this. You go in locker rooms and you think of what it's like outside. All the buzz, talk radio, and newspapers and everything. It's like intense. Then you go into a locker room. It's like you guys just walking around. Hey, how you doing? It's just an insulated world, and football it requires so much time, so much energy, so much film work, so much time being in the building. They're immune to it. So I don't know that the pressure will define Zach Wilson. I don't think it will. Obviously his play will. And they all know about Joe Namath, but Joe Namath was so long ago that they're not like, it's just kind of a thought, and it's like it's out there, it's in the ether. But there's a lot that's expected of quarterbacks in the NFL, and a lot that's expected of quarterbacks in New York. When you're great, there's nothing like it.
That's right.
When you fail, it's a hard world, man.
Yeah, I learned that with Richard Todd. I felt sorry for him because I thought he was pretty good. He wasn't great, but boy, when it turned south, it was tough. It was tough for him, and especially coming from Alabama. Yeah. Let me ask about one other team, New England. Everyone's expecting them to make a move, up, down, sideways, whatever. I think it certainly depends on what happens at the top end of the draft. What about you? Do you think they make a move on a quarterback in this draft? And do you think they make a move on a quarterback in the 1st round of this draft?
I think they will. I err on the side of, I think Bill Belichick will go for it. I think the spot that seems to be the most in play, Atlanta to some degree, but not so much. I think Carolina at number 8. That one seems to be the spot. They've been public about wanting to trade back. And I think if Belichick can get up there to 8 and get a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance, I think he'll do it.
Bob, thanks so much for doing this, Bob. I got one more for you. Kind of along the lines of Sam Darnold, sort of did this guy get a fair shot? And Buck fans know this guy very well. They don't want to lose him, Bob. And Todd Bowles, they don't want to lose him, but they just won a Super Bowl. You know how good he is as a coordinator. Bob, his first year in New York, fantastic. Takes over a 4-12 team, wins 10 games. Bob, they go to Buffalo. I believe the playoff spot was on the line that year, and Fitzpatrick stunk. He threw 3 picks, and he was awful. Then they go 5-11, 5-11. But he's got Fitzpatrick and Josh McCown, Bob. And then Darnold's rookie year, 4-12, and that's it for Todd Bowles. Will he get another shot, and should he get another shot, Bob?
I think the second question's easier. I think he should get another shot. Will he get another shot? I don't know. It's a league that really goes for the hot, young, offensive coach. So, I think Leftwich probably fits a little bit better into that mold. But Bowles, Bowles is an old soul, and I've known him since he was a player. and he's a good football coach, and I think he should get another shot. And if he does, I think he'll be a much better coach. And if he gets into a stable situation where the quarterback situation is resolved once he gets there, or he can kind of get his own guy in there and have stability with a general manager, I think it would go a long way. It was just not a comfortable fit with Mike McCagnon in New York. If he was coming in this year in New York, man, they could be a lot better off. So hope he does get another shot. Like him as a coach a lot. Think he deserves it.
Could he be, Bob? Could he be a guy like Wade Phillips or Hans Barger that's just a better coordinator than a head coach? Could be. You can ask that question. And there's a lot of guys who fit that description. But I think there's something in Bowles that simmers, and that if he does get another opportunity, he'll know he's going to just go for things more and not sit back like he did with the Jets and just say, look, I'm on the line here. I'm doing what I got to do. Kind of like what Parcells did in his second year with the Giants. He just said, screw it. I got to be myself. And it's me on the line. So I think Bowles would be more in that direction if he does get another shot.
A couple last ones from me. First of all, this draft coming up is on the heels of a season where some teams played partial seasons. Some teams didn't even play seasons. Some players opted out because of COVID. How extraordinary is this draft going to be, and how unpredictable do you expect it to be based on the fact that the past year was so unpredictable and extraordinary?
Yeah. Clark, I think, it's really good question, good issue, because it's definitely in play. I think the unpredictability will be off the charts, especially as you go down the draft. But even in the first round, it's like, this is, to me, is like a draft of 15 players that, are okay. These guys are, and then it's everybody else.
Right.
So I think that really sets the stage for a lot of unpredictability. I do think, though, that, when you thought back to last March and April, are they even going to have a college football season? To where they got to, where there was a lot of football played. I think there was enough football played. I think there's enough tape from 2019 where I feel like teams will be feeling like they're making solid decisions, but it's a crapshoot anyway. You throw in a COVID season, then it's even more unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, two of those tackles that I mentioned to you, Sewell and Slater, they didn't play last year. Northwestern didn't have a season, and Sewell opted out. And then you look at Trey Lance, and people say he's a top 5 quarterback. Played one football game in, I think, the last 16 months. So
it's amazing.
Yeah,
you're really going on projection.
That's
and
right.
It can be treacherous.
Yep. And the last question for you: how do Ira, Ian, and I get a Wikipedia page? How is that? You got one. How do we get one? Could you help us out here? Give us a little instruction.
I didn't ask for one. It just showed up one day. And I'm like, okay, great. But I think we all deserve them. I mean, it's everybody. Okay. And hey, Clark, why do you know that? What are you Googling my name?
No, it came from the sage of Tampa who knows everything. He told me, Bob Glauber's got his own page. I went, what? He said, yeah, Bob Glauber's got his own page. So now people in Tampa are beginning to know that there is someone else in that family than Bill Glauber.
I wanted to look up Glauber because I thought he was born in the villages in Florida, Trump country, and it's White Plains.
Yeah, the villages are where you and I are going, Ira, pretty soon. Soon about them later. Hey, Bob Glauber, thanks so much for the time, and good luck with your next and hopefully final mock draft.
Oh my goodness, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Me, guys. All right.
That was Bob Glauber of Newsday, Hall of Fame voter. Always fun to catch up with him, Ira. Love listening to him. And I do think this is going to be a make or break year for Daniel Jones with the Giants. I do think this is going to be the year to find out whether he makes it or breaks it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not optimistic.
Clark, talking about Jones, and I think Ian will back me up on this. The Bucs played at the Giants. They were lucky to win. Tampa didn't play a very good game. And Ian, you remember that towards the end of that game, and it was close, A couple of giant receivers got behind the Bucs secondary, and Jones, he misfired, Ian, at least twice that I remember on touchdowns. And you got to make those plays as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, that's right. Well, if he doesn't make them, we'll be talking about who the Giants are going to draft as their quarterback this time next year.
That's right.
That's going to do it. But Ira, someone told me that you've already lined up a high-profile general manager for next week, and someone apparently who chooses in the top 10 of this draft. Is that true?
That is true. We'll let our listeners try to throw darts at the board and figure it out. But we're coming out strong next week with maybe a double-barrel superstar edition.
We come out strong every week with a double-barrel edition of you and me, and then Ian. And then last question, Ira. I mean, you more excited about that, getting that GM, or are you more excited about tomorrow's draft in Cleveland, where it could rain?
Clark, I'm going to say this, and our listeners aren't going to hear it, Clark. They don't want to hear it, but I'll say it because I got the guts to say it, Clark. This is a lousy draft. I mean, nobody wants to talk about it. The quarterbacks are going to be overdrafted. You know that. Normally they'd be second rounders, a couple of them. They're going top 10. And I think it's about 15 players deep, as Bob Glauber suggested. Hopefully next year will be better. I don't think this is a great draft, Clark.
Well, if you've got the guts to say that, Ira, I guess we know who we're talking about when we rename this podcast Guts and Genius.
There you go, baby.
Well, anyway, I'm looking forward to next week right here. Ira, finish it. Where?
On the eye test for 2, my friend.
You got it.
Eye test for 2.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.